I paid $55,000 for my niece's wedding, only for her to uninvite me 2 days before the ceremony because I was too old to fit the vibe. She claimed she needed to cut costs and limit the guest list to immediate family. Since I wasn't family enough to attend, I decided I wasn't family enough to pay. I picked up the phone and canceled the checks. I sat on my lanai with a cup of Earl Grey tea in my hand. The steam rose in a straight line before the wind from the Pacific Ocean caught it. From my chair, I could see the water stretching out below the cliffs of La Jolla. It was a Thursday afternoon, quiet and bright. This was the retirement I had worked 40 years to earn. On the glass table next to me, my checkbook sat open. I had just balanced the ledger. It was a habit from my days as a chief financial officer. I liked to know exactly where every dollar went. My eyes moved to the entry from last week. Gilded Cliff Resort. I looked at the number written in the debit column. $30,000. That was the second payment. 6 months ago, I had written a check for $25,000 for the deposit. $55,000 total. It was a lot of money even for me, but it was for Chloe. Chloe was my niece. My brother David passed away 10 years ago. At his funeral, I held Chloe's hand. She was 22 then. I promised David I would look after her. I paid for her final year of college. I helped her with the down payment on her first car. And when she got engaged to a young man named Jason, I stepped in to make the wedding happen. She wanted the Gilded Cliff in Carlsbad. It was a venue with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a view that cost a fortune. She said it was her dream. I wanted to give her that dream. I took a sip of my tea. It was hot and strong with the taste of bergamot. I felt good about the checks. The wedding was only 48 hours away. Saturday evening. I had my dress hanging in the closet. It was a navy blue silk gown. I had bought silver shoes to match, low heels because my knees weren't what they used to be. My iPad pinged. The sound was sharp in the quiet afternoon. I set my teacup down on the coaster and picked up the tablet. A notification banner sat across the top of the screen. New email from Chloe. I smiled. She was probably sending last-minute instructions. Maybe she needed me to bring the final payments for the photographer or the DJ. I swiped the screen to open the mail app. The subject line made me pause. Subject: urgent. Wedding guest list update. I adjusted my reading glasses. I tapped the email to open it. The text was short. I read the first sentence and my smile faded. Hi Auntie Viv. I'm writing this with a heavy heart. As we get closer to the big day, 48 hours. We've had to make some incredibly difficult decisions regarding the budget and venue capacity. I frowned. I knew the budget better than anyone. I was the one paying the bills. The venue capacity was 300 people. The guest list was only 150. I continued reading. We realized we really need to prioritize the young and fun vibe for the reception photos, and we are strictly limiting the guest list to immediate family and the wedding party. I read that line again. Young and fun. I looked down at my hand holding the tablet. My skin was thin. I had age spots. My knuckles were slightly swollen from arthritis. I was 74. I was certainly not young, but the next paragraph hit me harder than the comment about my age. Since you're technically extended family, and we need to cut costs, we unfortunately have to rescind your invitation. I know you'll understand. We'll send you pictures. Love, Chloe. I sat very still. The wind blew a strand of white hair across my face. I brushed it away slowly. Technically extended family. The words seemed to float on the screen. I thought about the checks I wrote. I thought about the deposit. I thought about the catering contract I signed with my own name. I was immediate family when I paid for her tuition. I was immediate family when I signed the contract for the venue. I was immediate family when she needed money for the dress. But now for the party I was just an old woman. I was a prop that didn't fit the vibe. I placed the iPad back on the glass table. I looked out at the ocean again. The water was the same blue. The sun still shone on the bougainvillea in my garden, but the air felt colder. She thought I was just a guest. She thought she was uninviting an aunt who would send a toaster as a gift. She forgot who signed the checks. She forgot that the contract with the Gilded Cliff Resort was not in her name. It was in mine. I picked up my tea. It had cooled down. I drank it anyway. It tasted bitter now. Chloe wanted to cut costs. That was her reason. She wanted to save money by removing me from the list. I took a deep breath. The smell of the ocean salt filled my nose. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the same feeling I used to get in the boardroom right before I made a difficult decision. I didn't feel the need to scream. I didn't feel the need to cry. I just felt clear. If she wanted to cut costs, I would help her. I would help her cut all the costs. I looked at the time. It was 4:15 p.m. on Thursday. The banks would close soon. The venue office would close at 6 p.m. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Chloe. I dialed the number for the Gilded Cliff Resort. I walked from the bright sunlight of the lanai into the cool shade of my living room. The air conditioning hummed quietly. I placed my empty teacup on the kitchen counter and rinsed it. The water felt cold on my hands. I dried them on a linen towel and walked down the hallway to my home office. My office was a serious room. It had bookshelves filled with binders and old tax records. My desk was large, made of dark wood, with a leather surface in the center. I sat down in my chair. It creaked slightly as I settled in. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. I pulled out a thick manila folder labeled Chloe's Wedding in black marker. I placed it on the desk and opened it. Inside was the contract. It was 20 pages long. I turned to the last page. There, at the bottom, was my signature, Vivian Sterling. Directly below it was the line for financier/responsible party. My name was there too. Chloe's name was only listed under event contact. I smoothed the paper with my hand. The paper was heavy and textured. I took a breath and looked at the phone number for the Gilded Cliff Resort again. I dialed the number on my cell phone and put it on speaker. I set the phone on the desk next to the contract. "Thank you for calling the Gilded Cliff Resort," a voice said. "This is Marcus. How may I assist you?" Marcus sounded happy. He had a high, energetic voice. I remembered him from our tasting session 3 months ago. He had worn a purple tie and laughed at all of Chloe's jokes. "Hello, Marcus," I said. My voice was steady. "This is Vivian Sterling." "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said. I could hear the smile in his voice. "So good to hear from you. We are all getting ready for Saturday. The forecast looks perfect. 72 degrees and clear skies." "That sounds lovely," I said. "Did you need to add anything to the final head count? Or perhaps upgrade the wine package? We still have a few cases of the Pinot Noir you liked." I looked at the contract. I looked at the clause labeled cancellation and refunds. "No, Marcus," I said. "I am calling to cancel the event." The line went silent. For a moment I thought the call had dropped. I'm sorry," Marcus said. His voice was lower now. The signal cut out. "Did you say cancel?" "Yes," I said. "I am exercising my right as the contract holder to cancel the wedding scheduled for this Saturday." "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said. He gave a nervous laugh. "You must be joking. The wedding is in 48 hours. The florists are loading their trucks tomorrow morning. The kitchen has already ordered the sea base." "I am not joking," I said. "I have the contract in front of me. I am the sole signatory and the financial sponsor. I am terminating the agreement." "But," Marcus stammered. I heard the sound of keyboard keys clicking rapidly in the background. "If you cancel now, you lose the full deposit. That is $25,000. And the cancellation fee. Mrs. Sterling, this is a massive financial loss." "I am aware of the cost," I said. "I am willing to forfeit the deposit." "And the remaining balance?" Marcus asked. His voice was tight. "We received your checks for the catering and the venue fee last week. $30,000. We were going to deposit them this afternoon." "You will find that difficult," I said. "I have just logged into my bank account. I placed a stop payment order on those checks 5 minutes ago. If you try to cash them, they will be declined." "Mrs. Sterling, please," Marcus said. He sounded frantic now. "We can't just stop. We have staff scheduled. We have vendors. If the funds aren't verified, the system automatically locks the event order. The gates won't open." "I understand the process, Marcus. That is why I called you directly." "Does Chloe know?" he asked. "Does the bride know you are doing this?" I looked at the email on my iPad, which was still sitting on the corner of my desk. "Since you're technically extended family, Chloe informed me that she needed to cut costs, I said. She was very specific about the budget. I am simply helping her with that request. Mrs. Sterling, this is a disaster, Marcus said. I have to alert the general manager. I have to call the vendors to stop delivery. You are shutting down the entire operation. Yes, I said. I am. Are you sure? He asked one last time. Once I hit this button, the date opens up. The kitchen stops prep. There is no going back. I looked out the window of my office. A hummingbird hovered near the feeder. Its wings moved so fast they were a blur. It took a drink, then zipped away. I am sure, I said. Please release the date. Good day, Marcus. I tapped the red button on my phone. The call ended. The room was very quiet. The hum of the air conditioner seemed louder now. I looked down at the contract. It was just paper again. It was no longer a promise. It was just paper with ink on it. I closed the folder. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt the way I used to feel after closing a difficult audit. I felt finished. I stood up and walked to the bookshelf. There was a framed photograph on the second shelf. It was a picture of my brother David and me. We were standing on the pier in Santa Monica. He was laughing, his hair messy from the wind. I was squinting at the sun. He had worked hard his whole life. He loved his daughter. He would have wanted her to have a beautiful wedding. But he also taught me to respect myself. He taught me that family treats you like family. I tried, David, I said to the photo. My voice was soft in the empty room. I turned away from the bookshelf. I walked back to the kitchen. I needed to make dinner. I had a piece of salmon in the refrigerator and some asparagus. I would cook a simple meal. The sun was starting to lower in the sky. The light in the kitchen was turning gold. My phone sat on the counter, black and silent. I knew it wouldn't stay silent for long. I woke up at 7 a.m. on Friday. The sun came through the blinds in thin yellow stripes. I stretched my legs under the cotton sheets. My bedroom was quiet. Usually, the day before a family wedding involves noise. There are phone calls about lost luggage. There are frantic text messages about wrinkled suits or missing boutonnieres. I expected my phone to light up with questions about traffic on the I-5 freeway. But my phone sat on the nightstand, dark and still. I got out of bed and put on my slippers. I walked to the kitchen and started the coffee maker. The machine hissed as the water heated up. I could smell the dark roast beans. I put 2 slices of sourdough bread in the toaster. I waited for the pop. I buttered the toast and took my coffee to the dining table. I ate slowly. I listened to the crunch of the crust. Outside, a neighbor was mowing his lawn. The drone of the engine was steady and low. It was a normal Friday. After breakfast, I went to the sunroom. This was where I kept my orchids. I had 20 pots lined up on tiered shelves. Orchids require patience. They require specific conditions. If you give them too much water, they rot. If you give them too little light, they refuse to bloom. I picked up a spray bottle. I checked the moss in the first pot. It was dry. I misted it gently. The water droplets sat on the thick, green leaves. I moved to the next pot. This one had a white bloom with a purple center. I wiped a speck of dust from the petal with my thumb. I checked the roots. They were silver and firm. I spent 2 hours in the sunroom. I trimmed a dead leaf from a phalaenopsis. I wiped down the shelves. The humidity in the room made my skin feel soft. I focused entirely on the plants. I did not think about the gilded cliff resort. I did not think about the grand ballroom with the ocean view. At 11 a.m., I went back into the main house to refill my water glass. That was when the noise began. My phone was on the kitchen counter where I had left it. It buzzed against the granite. It stopped, then buzzed again immediately. The screen lit up. Then it went dark. Then it lit up again. I walked over to the counter. I picked up the phone. There were 14 missed calls. 3 were from Chloe. 5 were from her mother, my sister-in-law, Brenda. 6 were from a number I didn't recognize, probably Jason, the groom. There were 20 text messages. I unlocked the screen. The messages scrolled down in a long list of gray bubbles. Chloe, Aunt Viv? Chloe, Marcus called me. Chloe. He said the checks are gone. Chloe. Pick up the phone. Brenda. Vivian, what is going on? The venue manager says we have to leave the property by noon. Chloe. The florist just turned the truck around. Chloe. They are locking the doors. Chloe. This has to be a mistake. Call me now. I read the messages. I did not type a reply. I placed the phone back on the counter, screen down. I knew exactly what was happening in Carlsbad. It was an hour north of here. By now, the wedding planner would be standing in the empty ballroom. The tables would not be set. The chairs would be stacked against the wall. The kitchen staff would be packing up their knives. Marcus would be explaining that without payment, the insurance policy was void and no event could take place. I imagined Chloe standing in the lobby. She would be wearing her white bride sweatshirt. She would be holding her phone, her knuckles white. She would be looking for someone to blame. I opened the refrigerator and took out a pitcher of iced tea. I poured a glass. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. I drank it standing up. The phone buzzed again. It vibrated hard, rattling the spoon I had left on the counter. I watched it. It was just a machine. Could not force me to speak. I walked into the living room and picked up my book. It was a historical biography I had started last week. I sat in my favorite armchair. I opened the book to the bookmark. I read the same paragraph 3 times. The general ordered the retreat at dawn, leaving the supplies behind. I couldn't focus on the general. I could only hear the buzzing from the kitchen. It was persistent. It was angry. I checked my watch. It was 12:30 p.m. By now, the venue would be officially closed to them. They would be standing in the parking lot. The guests who had arrived early for the rehearsal dinner would be checking into their hotels, wondering why the welcome schedule had been canceled. My stomach tightened slightly. It wasn't guilt. It was the physical reaction to conflict. I took a deep breath. I let the air out slowly through my nose. I had made a decision. A CFO does not panic when the numbers come in. A CFO looks at the spreadsheet and accepts the reality. The reality was simple. I was not immediate family. Therefore, I was not the financier. I stood up and walked to the window. The street was empty. The mail carrier drove by in his white truck. He stopped at my mailbox, put a bundle of letters inside, and drove on. Life in La Jolla continued. I went back to the kitchen. The phone had finally stopped buzzing. The screen was dark. I knew it was a temporary silence. They were regrouping. They were talking in a circle, voices high and fast. They were figuring out their next move. They would realize that yelling at Marcus wouldn't fix the bank transfer. They would realize there was only one person who could turn the lights back on. Me. I looked at the clock on the oven. 3:45 p.m. I decided I would make a fresh pot of hot tea. Earl Grey. I would get out the good china, the cup with the gold rim. I would sit on the lanai and watch the afternoon light hit the water. And then I would answer the phone. I carried the tray to the lanai. The china cup rattled softly against the saucer. I set it down on the glass table. I poured the Earl Grey from the small white teapot. Steam rose and twisted in the air. I sat down and smoothed the fabric of my linen trousers. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the patio tiles. The air was cooling down. My phone was in my pocket. I took it out and placed it next to the teacup. It rang almost immediately. The screen showed a picture of Chloe. It was an old photo from her college graduation. She was wearing a black cap and gown, smiling wide. I remembered taking that picture. I had bought her the camera she used that year. I let it ring 3 times. Then I pressed the green button. "Hello, Chloe," I said. "Aunt Viv." Her voice was a scream, cracked at the end. She was crying. I could hear heavy, wet gasps for breath. They canceled it. They canceled the whole thing. Marcus said the checks bounced and the contract holder terminated the event. I took a sip of tea. It was hot. It warmed my chest. "Hello, Chloe," I said again, softer this time. "Fix this," she yelled. "You have to fix this right now. Why did you do this? Everyone is here. Jason's parents are in the lobby." The florist left. "I received your email, dear," I said. I kept my voice flat and even. "I what?" She hiccuped. "The email." "You were very clear," I said. "You wrote that you needed to cut costs. You wrote that you needed to prioritize the budget." "I didn't mean this." She was shouting again, but there was confusion in her tone. "I just meant the guest list. I didn't mean you didn't have to pay." I looked at the ocean. A sailboat was moving slowly across the horizon. Chloe, I said. I am the one who paid the deposit. I am the one who signed for the catering. Those were my costs. But you can't just take it back, she sobbed. It's my wedding. You promised. I promised to help family, I said. But your email stated that I am technically extended family. You said you needed to limit the event to immediate family. That was just for the party, she screamed. We wanted a specific look. I didn't think you'd be so petty. I set the teacup down. The china made a sharp clink on the glass. It is not pettiness, Chloe, I said. It is business. You established the terms. You decided who was essential to the event and who was not. I simply agreed with you. You're ruining everything. Her voice rose to a screech. I'll be the laughingstock of everyone. My friends are posting about it. Jason is freaking out. Well, I said. I picked up my spoon and stirred the tea, though it needed no stirring. At least you saved on the cost of my plate. That is $200 right there. That should help with the budget you were so worried about. Aunt Viv, please. The anger broke and she started wailing. It was a child's cry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Just transfer the money back. Please. Marcus said if you wire the funds by 5 p.m., they might be able to get the kitchen staff back. I looked at my watch. It was 4:10 p.m. I'm afraid that is impossible, I said. Why? She begged. You have the money. I know you have the money. I have already allocated those funds to a new project, I lied. I looked at the bougainvillea climbing the trellis. The flowers were a deep, vibrant magenta. I am remodeling my garden. I want to make sure it has a very specific aesthetic. You're joking, she whispered. You're choosing a garden over my wedding? I am choosing where I invest my resources, I said, just as you chose your guest list. There was silence on the line. I could hear voices in the background. Someone was shouting Jason's name. I heard a door slam. You're awful, Chloe said. Her voice was low and shaking. I hate you. I know, I said. But I am also debt-free. And I am enjoying a very good cup of tea. I pressed the red button. The call ended. I put the phone face down on the table. My hand was trembling slightly. Not from fear. From adrenaline. It was done. The final tie was cut. I picked up the teapot and poured another cup. The liquid was dark amber. I added a splash of milk. I watched the white cloud swirl into the tea until it turned a soft beige. The sun dipped below the horizon. The sky turned purple. The air grew cold. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. I sat there for a long time. The house behind me was dark. The ocean in front of me was black. I was alone. And for the first time in months, my bank account balance belonged entirely to me. Saturday morning arrived with a gray mist over the coast. It was the day the wedding should have happened. I did not set an alarm. I woke up naturally at 8 a.m. The house was silent. There were no more frantic calls. I had blocked Chloe's number the night before. I had also blocked Brenda and Jason. My phone was just a phone again, not a siren. I walked to the kitchen and made oatmeal with cinnamon and sliced bananas. I ate it standing at the counter. The house felt larger than usual. I spent the morning cleaning. I vacuumed the rugs in the living room. I dusted the blinds. I wiped down the baseboards in the hallway. Physical work felt good. It was simple. Dirt existed and then I removed it. At noon I sat down at my computer. I had one more task to complete. I opened my email. There were 3 new messages in my inbox from Brenda. The subject lines were in all capital letters. Family emergency, please read, you have to fix this. I selected them all and clicked delete. I clicked compose new email. I typed in the addresses of the extended family. My cousins in Oregon. My late brother's friends who I had stayed in touch with. The relatives on my mother's side who had been invited to the wedding but were not part of the immediate group. Subject: regarding the cancellation of Chloe's wedding. I cracked my knuckles. I began to type. Dear family and friends, by now you have likely heard that the wedding scheduled for today at the Gilded Cliff Resort has been canceled. I am writing to clarify the situation. As I understand, there is some confusion regarding the cause. Earlier this week, I received a notification from the bride that due to budget constraints and a desire for a younger atmosphere, my invitation was rescinded. I was informed that the guest list was being restricted to immediate family only. As the sole financier of the event, I respected the bride's wish to cut costs. Since I was classified as extended family and removed from the guest list, I removed my financial sponsorship accordingly. I apologize for any inconvenience this has caused regarding your travel plans. Please know that this decision was made in alignment with the bride's stated priorities. Sincerely, Vivian Sterling. I read it over. It was factual. It was direct. There was no emotion in the text. It was a status report. I pressed send. I closed the laptop. I went to my closet and pulled out the navy blue silk dress I was supposed to wear today. The fabric was cool and smooth. I looked at the silver shoes in the box on the floor. I wouldn't need them. I took the dress off the hanger. I folded it carefully. I placed it in a donation bag I kept in the corner of the closet. Someone else could wear it. Someone who was actually invited to a party. I changed into my gardening clothes, a pair of old canvas trousers and a loose cotton shirt. I put on my wide-brimmed hat. I went out to the backyard. The sun had burned off the morning mist. The air was warm. I walked to the flower beds along the fence. The soil was dry. I picked up my trowel. I dug into the dirt. It was dark and rich. I pulled out a weed that had grown near the rose bushes. The roots were long and white. They snapped as I yanked them out. I worked for 3 hours. I pruned the roses. I cleared the dead leaves from under the hedge. My hands got dirty. My back ached in a dull, steady way. When I stood up, the sun was beginning to set. The sky was turning a soft pink. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was walking her dog on the sidewalk. She waved at me over the fence. "Beautiful evening, Vivian," she called out. "Yes, it is," I said. "Did you have plans this weekend? I thought you mentioned a wedding." I wiped my hands on my trousers. "Plans changed," I said. "I decided to stay home and work on the garden." "Well, it looks lovely," she said. She tugged on the dog's leash. "Have a good night." "You too," I said. I watched her walk away. I looked back at my house. The windows were reflecting the sunset. It looked solid. It looked quiet. I walked inside. I washed the dirt off my hands. The water turned brown in the sink, then ran clear. I was tired, but it was a good tired. The kind that comes from work, not stress. I went to the kitchen and opened a bottle of white wine. I poured a glass. I took it to the living room and sat in the armchair. I looked at the empty space on the wall where I used to hang a calendar. I didn't need to mark the dates anymore. I didn't have any deadlines. I took a sip of wine. It was crisp and cold. I closed my eyes. I could hear the ocean through the open window. The waves were crashing against the rocks. Rhythmically. Endlessly. I was alone in the house. But the house was mine. The silence was mine. And the money in the bank was mine. Sunday morning in La Jolla was usually quiet, but this silence felt different. It was the silence of a phone that had stopped ringing because I had severed the connection. I sat at my kitchen table with the Sunday newspaper spread out before me. The paper smelled of ink and dry pulp. I turned the page. I read an article about local zoning laws. I read the comics. I read the weather report. It was 9 a.m. If the wedding had happened, I would be at a farewell brunch right now. I would be eating rubbery scrambled eggs in a hotel conference room. I would be listening to Brenda complain about the centerpieces. I would be handing over another check for a honey fund. Instead, I was eating a poached egg on toast in my own kitchen. The yolk broke and ran yellow over the crust. It was perfectly cooked. I wiped my mouth with a napkin and walked to the living room. My laptop sat on the coffee table where I had left it last night. The little green light blinked, indicating new messages. I sat down and opened the lid. The screen woke up. My inbox contained 12 new emails. They were replies to the message I had sent yesterday. I clicked the first one. It was from my cousin Robert, who lived in Portland. "Vivian, we were at the airport when we got your email. We turned around and went home. Honestly, I'm not surprised. David would have been furious if he knew how they treated you. Let's get lunch next time you're in Oregon." I clicked the next one. It was from my brother's old business partner, Hashington. Received. Understood. We always knew she was spoiled. Good for you, Viv. There were a few angry ones. A cousin on Brenda's side wrote, "This is a family matter. You shouldn't have aired dirty laundry." I dragged that one to the trash folder. I did not feel a sting. I simply deleted it. Then my landline rang. I looked at the cordless phone on the side table. Only a few people called the landline. Picked it up. The caller ID said Linda Sterling. Linda was my cousin on my father's side. She was one of the few relatives I had not blocked on my cell, but she preferred the house phone. She had driven down from Sacramento for the wedding. I pressed the talk button. "Hello, Linda," I said. "Vivian," Linda whispered. She sounded like she was hiding in a closet. "I am at the hotel. It is a war zone here." "Is it?" I asked. I leaned back in my chair. "You have no idea," she said. "When the venue locked the doors yesterday, Jason's mother started screaming at Brenda. They were in the lobby for 2 hours. The police came because of the noise." "I see," I said. "And Chloe," Linda continued, her voice dropping lower. "She posted a video online. She was crying, saying she was the victim of a vindictive relative. But then people started commenting. Someone leaked your email. Now half the comments are saying she deserved it." I looked at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight coming through the window. "How is the weather in Carlsbad?" I asked. "The weather?" Linda paused. "It's sunny." "Why?" "I was just wondering. It looks like a nice day for a drive." "Vivian, did you hear me? Jason called off the honeymoon. He said he needs to evaluate their financial compatibility. He found out Chloe put the deposits on your credit card without having her own savings." "That sounds like a prudent decision on his part," I said. "You really don't care, do you?" Linda asked. There was no judgment in her voice, only curiosity. "I care about respect, Linda. I paid for respect. I did not receive it. The transaction is void." "Well," Linda sighed, "I'm checking out. I'm driving back to Sacramento. I just wanted to tell you. You have guts, Viv. I would have just paid it and complained later." "Safe travels, Linda," I said. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment. I imagined the hotel lobby. I imagined the shouting. I imagined the pile of luggage and the wasted flowers. It was a scene of chaos. I stood up. I felt a sudden need to leave the house. Not to run away, but to use the day. I went to my bedroom and changed. I put on a pair of white linen trousers and a blue cashmere sweater. I put on my sunglasses. I picked up my car keys. I drove my sedan down the coast. The Pacific Coast Highway was busy. Convertibles drove past with their tops down. Cyclists rode in the bike lane. I drove into the village of La Jolla. I parked the car on a side street. I walked to a French bakery I had liked for years but rarely visited because it was expensive. I walked inside. The air smelled of butter and vanilla. I looked at the glass display case. There were rows of tarts, eclairs, and macarons. "1 lemon tart, please," I said to the girl behind the counter. "And a cappuccino." I paid with my credit card. The same card that would have been charged thousands of dollars today for flowers I wouldn't have seen. I took my pastry and coffee to a small metal table on the sidewalk. I sat down. I used a small fork to cut a piece of the tart. The crust crumbled. The lemon filling was smooth and yellow. I put it in my mouth. It was sharp and sweet. People walked by. A young couple walked hand in hand. A woman pushed a stroller. None of them knew who I was. None of them knew I was the vindictive aunt from the internet video. To them, I was just an elderly woman enjoying a Sunday treat. I watched a seagull land on a lamppost. It looked down at me with a black, beaded eye. I took a sip of the cappuccino. The foam stuck to my lip. I wiped it away. I thought about David. I thought about how hard he worked to build his company. He used to tell me, "Viv, never let them count your money for you." He would have been sad about the wedding. He would have been heartbroken to see his daughter crying in a lobby. But he would have hated the disrespect more. He raised us to be strong. I finished the tart. I wiped the crumbs from the table into a napkin. I walked back to my car. The sea breeze messed up my hair. I didn't fix it. I drove home with the windows down. I turned on the radio. It was playing a classical station. Violins filled the car. When I pulled into my driveway, the sun was beginning to lower again. The shadows of the palm trees were long across the lawn. I walked to the mailbox. It was empty because it was Sunday. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was cool and still. The red light on the landline was blinking. Someone else had called while I was out. I walked over to the machine. I pressed the erase all button. I did not listen to the message. I went to the kitchen and washed my hands. The soap smelled of lavender. I looked at my reflection in the window above the sink. My face looked the same as it did 3 days ago. I had the same wrinkles, the same white hair, but my shoulders felt lighter. The weight of the obligation was gone. I walked to the living room and sat on the sofa. I pulled a throw blanket over my legs. The room dimmed as the sun went down. I was the villain in Chloe's story. I knew that. I would be the story told at Christmas dinners for years. Remember when Aunt Viv canceled the wedding? Let them tell the story. I had my home. I had my garden. And I had my dignity. 3 weeks later, the noise in my driveway was loud. It was not the sound of wedding guests or arguments. It was the sound of a cement mixer. I stood on the front porch with a roll of blueprints in my hand. The morning air was crisp. A team of 4 men in neon yellow vests moved back and forth across my lawn. They carried stones. They pushed wheelbarrows full of dark soil. Luis, the landscape architect, walked up the steps. He took off his hard hat and wiped his forehead. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, "we are ready to pour the foundation for the gazebo. Do you want to check the placement one last time?" "Yes, Luis," I said. "Let's look." I walked down the steps. My sneakers crunched on the gravel. We walked to the far corner of the yard, near the cliff edge where the view of the Pacific was widest. Wooden stakes with orange ribbons marked a hexagon on the ground. "The structure will go here," Luis said, pointing. "The koi pond will wrap around the left side. The waterfall will face the house, so you can hear it from your bedroom window." I looked at the stakes. I looked at the ocean beyond them. "It looks perfect," I said. "And the materials?" Luis asked. "You decided on the cedar?" "Yes," I said. "The best quality cedar. And the slate roof." "It will be beautiful," he said. "Expensive but beautiful." I smiled. "I have the budget for it." I walked back to the house while they started the mixer. The machine roared to life. It was a productive sound. It was the sound of something being built, not something falling apart. Inside, the house was clean and bright. I went to my office. The manila folder labeled Chloe's wedding was gone. I had shredded it 2 weeks ago. The paper strips were in the recycling bin. On my desk sat a new folder. It was labeled Garden Renovation. I opened it. The estimate from Luis was on top. The total cost for the gazebo, the pond, and the new landscaping was $32,000. It was almost exactly the amount I had stopped payment on for the wedding catering. I pulled out my checkbook. I uncapped my fountain pen. The ink was black. I wrote the date. I wrote Luis Landscape Design. I wrote the amount. My hand was steady. I signed Vivian Sterling with a flourish. I tore the check out of the book. It made a crisp ripping sound. I held it for a moment. This piece of paper represented a pond with orange fish. It represented a wooden bench where I would sit and read. It represented value. I heard the mail slot clatter in the front hallway. I capped my pen and walked to the door. A small pile of envelopes lay on the rug. Picked them up. A bill for electricity, a catalog for kitchenware, and a small square envelope with handwriting I recognized. It was from Chloe. I walked into the kitchen and picked up a letter opener. I slid the blade under the flap. I pulled out a card. On the front was a picture of a generic flower. Inside, the handwriting was small and cramped. "Aunt Viv, I'm returning the camera you gave me for graduation. I don't want to keep it. I'm sending it via UPS. Mom says I should talk to you, but I don't know what to say. The wedding didn't happen. We went to the courthouse yesterday. Just Jason and me. No guests. I guess you saved money, so you're happy. Chloe." I read the card twice. She still didn't understand. She thought it was about the money. She thought I was hoarding gold like a dragon. She didn't see that I had been willing to give her everything until she told me I was worth nothing. I placed the card on the counter. I did not feel angry. I did not feel the need to call her and explain. The lesson had been delivered. Whether she learned from it was not my responsibility. I picked up the check for Luis. I walked outside. The sun was high now. The smell of cedar wood filled the air. The workers were cutting the beams for the gazebo. Sawdust floated in the sunlight like gold dust. I handed the check to Luis. "Here is the deposit and the first installment," I said. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling," he said. He tucked it into his clipboard. "We should have the water running in the pond by Friday." "Take your time, Luis," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." I walked to the patio and sat in my chair. I picked up my cup of tea. It was Earl Grey, hot and strong. I looked at the construction site in my garden. In a week, there would be water flowing over stone. There would be fish swimming in the cool depth. There would be a roof to shelter me from the sun. I took a sip of tea. The liquid was warm. The ocean breeze was cool. I was 74 years old. I was extended family. And I was completely at peace. I watched the men work. I listened to the saw cut through the wood. "Checkmate," I whispered to the ocean. I drank my tea.